Thank you guys for tuning in to another episode of the TTE podcast. And I'd first like to start off by apologizing. I haven't been real active in this space lately. Had a lot of stuff going on a personal level, accomplishing some things, knocking out some goals and whatnot. So I might discuss that some other time. But I'm back. And so I kind of wanted to use this time to kind of talk about just some observations and some things I've been seeing going on and in the news and from a current news perspective and just what's going on in the country. It seems like it's just getting to be such a wild place. Um, so I thought I'd ask my brother and sister to jump on here to just kind of pulse check, like if I just want to know whether or not what I'm seeing and how I'm feeling, if it's way off base in any way. And this is a bit of an accountability project for me a little bit. So, Brian, Denise, how are you guys?
Good. How you doing?
Waiting for the other shoe to drop, man.
Yeah, it feels like
that's
that.
very
So speaking of
optimistic.
the other shoe, yeah. So speaking of the other shoe to drop, one of the things I've noticed that's been going on, it's unfair to say it's an uptick because that's not an accurate way to describe it. But the number, not the number, that's not what I want to say. The impact that these mass shootings are starting to have collectively on all of us is really starting to get to me. And the last three in particular, where it's, some black folks coming out of church at a grocery store in Buffalo, whether it's these kids in Texas that just made me sick to my stomach, or one that kind of hits close to home for the three of us, this shooting in a mall in Greenwood, Indiana, because we've got family that lives in Greenwood. So I don't pretend to know what the answer is, but one of the things I've been thinking about, and I'm curious to get your perspective on it, is I've never really been real big on like an assault weapons ban or anything like that. I kind of feel like if you're a responsible gun owner, it doesn't bother me if you own 45,000 guns and all the ammunition that goes with it. If you're responsible, that doesn't bother me. But I kind of feel like even responsible gun owners are starting to. It's kind of like when one of your kids breaks something in the house and you don't know who broke it, so everybody gets punished. It feels like it's approaching that level because when the police are outgunned because there are assault weapons on the street and they're pretty easy to get. Um, Maybe if the police are outgunned, maybe we should not allow weapons of war where the police are afraid to go into a school and take out an 18-year-old with an AR-15. Am I off base in this, or is it just an overreaction you think on my part? Because I'd have to think that there's got to be some folks out there that are thinking the way I'm thinking. But again, it's an accountability project for me. So Denise,
One, you're not off base. Two, historically speaking, the cops are always outgunned. They were outgunned at the Texas schoolhouse thing. Not schoolhouse, but the University of Texas at Austin shootout. They were outgunned then. Back in the 60s, they were outgunned at the school. That's neither here nor there. But I do agree with you to the point where we're at that point where it's like everybody needs to have a seat about these guns, because if we can't get the responsible folks to come over and at least agree with the folks that think that there shouldn't be any guns, at least have a happy medium, then everybody's going to lose their guns. I don't want to take your gun away. Personally, if that's you, fine. However, as somebody who has been held up by gunpoint or at gunpoint, it's not fun looking at the barrel of one. Just throwing that out there for those of you who haven't. It's not fun. But I'm not going to say just because of my one experience that I just don't want guns anywhere. I think there needs to be a responsible conversation where all sides can come together and have a decent conversation about it. Unfortunately, we're in a space now in the country where everybody has a side, nobody has a middle ground. Everyone needs to go into their respective corners, and there's nobody willing to come in and have a decent conversation about it.
And see, Denise, I'm conflicted because on some level, I agree with you. Like, my gut just keeps saying, especially in this hyper polarized environment we live in, that the solution is in the middle. So that's kind of what I feel like. But I honestly feel like we are reaching a point where you can stick your head in the sand about gun control, or you can feel however you want to feel about it in either extreme, either ban all guns or no gun should be banned. But it's getting to the point now where this is going to come to your town. There is
Mm-hmm.
going to be somebody disgruntled in your community who's going to be probably under the age of 35, who's been either radicalized online or been traumatized through bullying or whatever. And they are going to save up money and legally get an assault weapon or not an assault weapon. Hell, it could be a bow and arrow. And they're going to go to a public place and it's going to be chitty chitty bang bang. And it's going to come to your town. And, no crime's real till it hits your front door. But I just keep thinking, and I really had this thought when these kids got murdered in Texas, how many more children have to die before we do something? Because no parent should have to sacrifice their child in order to get gun reform. You know what I mean? like
Agreed.
like that is such an unfair ask, but that's kind of where we're at. Brian, what are your thoughts?
Well, certainly, as somebody who has children in school, it is um, it's scary to um, send your kids to school and have the thought that they might not come home because you know some kid, like you said, some kid's bullied, or I let them go down to the park and somebody's just letting off shots at the park, or and so as a parent it's tough because you want your kid to grow up. A lot of parents want their children to have maybe childhood similar to theirs, where you can go play in the park with your friends, or you can ride bikes, or you guys maybe just walk down to the store, or um, just do the innocent things that you would in your normal everyday life. And it's it's scary. So you want them to do that, but on the flip side, you're like, yeah, but I could also be sending them to be in the wrong place at the wrong time, and I can't imagine the grief and the hurt that those parents are going through. Because, like I said, you're sending your kid to school. A school, a s the structure itself should be one of the safest places in the community because it's a school. Like, and for us growing up, I don't even remember a mass shooting at a school before Columbine. Um, but I will agree with you on the point that you made earlier, Dennis, that I think that maybe this is just me getting older, but I do think that solutions that play us as a society are mostly found in the middle. Because you're going to have one extreme says take your guns away, one saying no, we're not taking our guns away. And I feel like there's a compromise somewhere in the middle. What that is, I have no idea. But I'm here for that conversation because we just can't keep doing this. This whole thoughts and prayers exercise that we do. Um,
Yep.
like on some level, that has to get old. Even if you are truly feeling that this way about guns and you love them to death, and you got 100 guns, and that's fine, okay. But I would think that at some point that person is tired of saying thoughts and prayers. Like it just because after a while they're just hollow words. They don't mean anything unless there's some action behind it, right? So I feel like I said, there is some sort of resolution, some sort of middle ground. I know the Supreme Court ruled that certainly the Second Amendment is here to stay. So you have to work within the confines of what we have, but you know there's got to be some sort of middle ground here.
Yeah, and I think part of that middle ground, and I think this is what bothers me about. Um, I hear a lot of people on the left talk about, well, you should be 21 in order to get an assault weapon. That feels like an arbitrary number to me. That seems like you. It seems like you went with that because you can't buy alcohol.
Well,
Like, I
all
don't
these numbers
know
are
that it's.
arbitrary. Like, there's, you know,
Yeah, you know what I mean. Like that. Like
18 is
it's just like you picked a
arbitrary.
number out of. I mean, yeah, make the number 25 or 48. Like fuck, I don't know. Like it just bothers me. Like, you know what I mean? Like it doesn't feel well reasoned and thought out that you got to 21. You know what I mean? Like it doesn't feel as if the public's going to be safer because you made the age 21 instead of 18. Does that
Well,
make
the
sense?
reason, yeah, it makes sense. And when you think about it, is that the logic is what people are looking at. It's like, well, you know, some like the numbers of alcoholism amongst teenagers went down because we made it 21. So clearly it worked with alcoholism. So therefore it should work with guns. It's a flawed logic.
Well, yeah, but also
Well,
think
I
about it
don't.
too. Well, go ahead, Dennis.
No, I was just going to say, I don't know that it's flawed logic. I just don't know that it's thought out all the way. That's the only point I'm.
Well, the point I was going to make was that, whenever they decided that 21 was the age of, or no, let me backtrack. Let me put it, come at it another way. When the framers decided how old you had to be president, right? Or work in Congress or be elected, I think you got to be what, 35,
Yeah.
somewhere in there to be president. So that would
To be
be
present.
to be president. But that was at a time when people were living to be what, like a max age was like 50 ish, somewhere in there, maybe
64,
50,
65.
maybe somewhere in there, right? In terms of your life expectancy. So that was
Mm-hmm.
based off then. Like, is that something that needs to be adjusted if you're going forward in terms of if we're going to be putting out restrictions on guns or whether it's liquor or what cigarettes, whatever the case would be? Is that something we need to look at in terms of a life expectancy? Because it almost seems like it's an arbitrary number, but I imagine there's some sort of data or maybe there's some sort of formulation that they came to that, but that also might be based on old data, whereas things need to be updated as time progresses.
That's a good point because clearly we have an 80-year-old president now, and I have mixed feelings about that. Um,
Well,
but
hmm,
getting, yeah, no, but we're not going to go into we're not going to go into that. And I don't want to
that's a
come
different
across as
pot.
being ageist in any way. Yeah, it's a different part. I don't want to come across as being ageist, but that man's 80 years old and he's not moving fast. That being said, though, um, yeah, I just feel like the solution is in the middle because you can't say eliminate all guns and any gun law that you put on the books doesn't change the fact that there are still illegal things that are happening and you should be able to have a gun to protect your home. But if you've got 75 police officers in a school against one guy with an automatic weapon and they won't go take the guy out, maybe we need to get rid of these things if these guys won't go in there and do the job that they signed up to do. Am I, Denise, am I off base in thinking that? Because I feel like that's a reasonable position that there were 75 of you on the video and you couldn't take out an 18-year-old with an assault weapon. So 19 kids and two teachers had to die because you couldn't muster the courage to go do the job that you signed up to do. Like, if this is going to prevent you from doing your job, then maybe we need to take these things off the street. And I know that feels extreme, but again, this is coming to your town
Mm-hmm.
whether you believe that or not is irrelevant because the statistics bear that out. So am I off base in thinking that, hey, like maybe we should ban it just to keep the police safe? Like maybe it's like a police safe.
No, I would say that there were that many cops. I know one cop in particular, I excused his behavior because his wife was one of the women in there that did get shot. And so they had to hold him back. You could see it in the security footage that he had gotten a text message from her once they entered the building, and he's like showing his phone to his people like, she says she's shot. Why are we not moving? That guy's excused. Everybody else, if
Yeah,
this is
burn
what
this
you
motherfucker
signed,
down.
that's what I'm saying.
My wife
I
got
need
shot.
somebody to come up in
Burn this shit
here.
to the ground. Find this
You know what I'm
fucker and
saying?
bury him. I'll do it.
Exactly. So I, I think what bothers me the most about these 75 people is that all of their pictures that if you have you looked at, I don't know if you guys have seen it, but have you ever checked out the website, that police department's website, the number of pictures they have with their bulletproof vests and them holding their guns and looking all hard and all that kind of stuff, and then you remember that they didn't go in to save these 19 kids and these 19
And
people.
see, Denise, I'm glad you said that, because that's the other side of this that really bothers me about this whole subject, about this whole concept of, gun control and all of this, is that a lot of this is just real fanboy dick swinging shit. Like, I want to be able to have an AR-15 because it makes my dick hard. You know what I
No,
mean?
Honestly,
yeah, yeah, honestly, yeah, it's
And I can't subscribe to that culture. Like, come on, bro. Like, you a grown man. Don't add inches to your dick.
I
What
don't
are
think
you
it's
doing?
hard dick syndrome. I just think
no,
it's
no,
small
no,
dick
no.
syndrome. I think
Yeah,
it's
I was
small
gonna say
dick
that.
syndrome.
I was gonna say, Denise. I think it's small dick energy is what it
Yep.
is.
hmm Like you
Exactly.
clearly something
Exactly.
happened in
That's what
your
I can't
life
subscribe
where
to.
you felt,
You
yeah,
bought a F-350. You bought a F-350 and you piss on your balls. Now all of a sudden you're a tough guy. I hate fake tough guy shit. I
right.
really, really do.
You're that dude that revs his engine down the street in a 25-mile-an-hour speed limit zone. Like you're that dude. Is that necessary?
Right, right. But wouldn't bust a grape in a fruit fight. You wouldn't go in here and save these kids, but you out here posing on a website like you tough.
Exactly.
That makes me, you know what I mean? It's like, oh, like I see both sides of the argument. I guess at the end of the day, I just struggle with why are innocent people having to die just so somebody can keep a gun so their dick can get hard every time they let off a shot. Like, I feel like that's where we've evolved as Americans, and it makes me sad.
And I think it's also the perception of what exactly entails in the Second Amendment. When you read it, we're talking. This
Well, I
was
don't know.
written,
That's
but I'm just saying this is written at a time when the guns were not even pistols; they were muskets, where it would take
well, we didn't have.
anywhere between 1 to 2 minutes to reload it.
Well,
It
that
was
and let's. I mean, let's
like
be
Brian
honest. There's
says,
no
maybe we need to
army. There's no
reevaluate.
navy. Can't
Yeah,
do that.
there's no army, there's no
It's very
navy.
clear that that's yeah. It's
Exactly.
very clear that we
So
can't. You can't reinterpret. Well, let me say this because I'm going to transition subjects here
What has been
because you just gave
reinterpreted.
me. Well, I was going to say you've given me a great segue, Denise. We can't reinterpret the Constitution because we have 5 or 6 Supreme Court justices that are now saying that you can't make law interpretation that's not rooted in history and tradition of the Constitution. And that was evident in this decision to overturn Roe versus Wade. So this idea that the law that you have has to be rooted in history and tradition in order to in order for it to be constitutionally viable is such a slippery slope, because at the time that document is written, only white men get a say in that. That's just a fact.
right.
I'm not trying to be
hmm
divisive here. That's just a fact, because the three of us are considered 3/5 of a person. Like, we acknowledge you are a person, but we need to count you as a person for the purposes
Of the
of
electoral
value and land and electoral, like all of this, all this rigmarole. But you won't give us the dignity of being full citizens because, hey, wait a minute, that might mess with the money. Women can't vote. It goes all down. So if you just follow that logic, it's like, come on. And even though they'll say, well, no, we're only talking about this one instance, we're not talking about any other rights. It's like, that's you guys today. Somebody else that's more radical than you coming behind you might have a different interpretation. and you won't be around to stop them. And
Mm-hmm.
I guess when it comes to that decision, I really I struggle with it, not because I'm not pro murdering babies, and I don't know any there isn't anybody in my life that's pro murdering babies. But the idea that the health of the mother is at stake, um, and this woman might die, and we could save her life, but you won't allow that decision to go through, because technically it's an abortion, is so short sighted, especially coming from far right religious folk who claim to be pro life but won't save the life in front of them. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Like, it's and don't get me wrong, like I'm not. I got to think about how I want to say this because this is going to sound bad, and I don't want it to sound bad.
Do you
I'm
want
not
time to think
for
about it
abortion
first?
for the no. I'm not for abortion for the sake of abortion. Like I think if you're using it as a form of birth control, I don't support that at all. You need to make better life choices. But there are circumstances, like this 10-year-old girl here in Ohio that got raped. The idea you were going to force that little girl to have a baby after she already went through something traumatic, there's like it lacks so much empathy that it's hard for me to listen to anything that you have to say on the subject when you display this lack of empathy. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. Yes. And I would say, as the only person here with a uterus, that when they overturned it,
That you know of. No, I'm just kidding.
whatever. First off, we're not even
That's an
going down
asshole
that.
move right there.
It
That's
is.
an asshole
That's
move,
a. You know
Tubbs.
what that is? You know what that is? That's a dick move. Way to go.
Yeah.
Way
Yeah, that
way to
is.
swing your
That's
dick
right. Yeah,
around.
just kick her right in the uterus, Brian. Kick her right
Yeah.
in the
Just
Jeez,
uterus.
man.
go ahead.
Anyways, it's funny, Dennis, that you started out with the historical aspect of it because in the fact that this little girl here in Columbus, that she had to go to Indiana in order to get uh, this abortion, it reminded me of a case a long time ago, and I believe it's still on the books in Indiana, where the state can determine whether or not you are fit to have children at all.
What state is this again?
This is Indiana.
Yeah.
Oh,
Can you
I
elaborate
believe
a
it
little
is still
more
on the
on
books.
yeah, I'd like to learn.
If
I'd like
you,
to learn a little more
yeah,
about
there's
that
a there's a
state-controlled birth. That I'd like to learn a
yes,
little.
there's a old case from back in like the 20s about a woman who had a baby and she was deemed not well off enough mentally to have children, and she was forcefully sterilized by the state. Now, they're not
And
going to
just
talk.
so we're clear, not
Yeah, yeah.
yeah, and just so we're clear, not to cut you off, but just so we're clear, for anybody listening that thinks, "Oh, that's super extreme, and that would never happen today, and that's 100 years ago," like we've evolved as that, and we've evolved past that. Michigan is trying to reactivate a law from 95 years ago that bans all abortions in all instances.
Yes.
So, to your point, Denise, if you can
Mm-hmm.
reach back that far for an example, clearly these lawmakers are reaching back that far to reenact a law that hasn't been active in almost a.
Right. And not to mention, the Nazis did the same thing. If you even
Now, I'm not
had
willing to
a
call these people. No, I'm not
No, I'm
willing to
not
call
calling
these
them
people
Nazis. I'm
Nazis.
not calling them
I'm
Nazis.
not willing to go.
But I'm not calling them Nazis. What I'm saying is that even the concept of what they're trying to do was actually enacted by the same people that we fought for freedom. So there's a
Well, and that's
logic in
because
that. You
we
know,
as Americans don't know our history. So,
no, we don't.
well,
No, we
it's
don't.
just, what to your point about the thing in Michigan, Dennis. I'll give you one even. I don't want to say more recent, but um, well, who was it? I think it was is it Fannie Lou Hamer? She and I was reading something
yeah,
about
Fannie.
her. I was reading something about her where she was in the hospital for something. Now, keep in mind, this is Mississippi, so this woman. So this is probably what 40s, 50s, somewhere in there. Um, a doctor gave her a hysterectomy without even telling her.
Yep.
And
Yeah,
so
oh
that
yeah,
is, yeah.
Yep.
history's
And so,
littered with those
so,
stories
so
that
history
are
is literally, especially, I say this tongue in cheek with our brethren in the South. Um, so yeah, so those type of, because obviously you don't want black people to populate, because if they populate, then of course they'll take over, which of course is clearly happening now, right? So, but anyway,
yeah, because we've
Man,
been
I tell
stuck
you,
at
I am
12%.
loaded.
We've been stuck at 12% for the last 200 years. Yeah.
I know, but I just thought of that, but I didn't mean to cut you off. Please go ahead.
No, it's cool. It just, I think for me, I myself personally, I am pro-life. I think that a child is a blessing no matter how it is conceived. But from a political perspective, I am pro-choice. And I'll always be
That's
pro-choice.
interesting. I don't know. I don't know that I
I
knew that about you before
yeah,
tonight. I don't know that I knew
I
that.
myself,
I would not have
if it
guessed that.
happened to me, no, if it happened to me tomorrow, if I popped up pregnant tomorrow, which would be hilarious, that Jesus decided to come back through me, hilarious.
You change your name to
But
Mary.
yeah, no, right? So,
You kind of
in the
have to.
small chance,
You kind of
and
have
the
to.
small chance that it would happen to me, I would carry the child to term because if that's what life dealt me, that is what life dealt me. Do I think I'd be a terrible parent? No, I think there's probably worse parents than me, but
Yes, there
I
are.
would carry the child.
There
Yeah,
are.
thank you. There are, but I myself, and from a political standpoint, I'm going to go with pro-choice because I've been in situations where I've had friends who have popped up pregnant and not known what to do. And it became a situation where you have to take yourself out of it for a second. Look at it from
Oh,
a
you're
different
right, Denise.
perspective.
Yeah, Denise, and I
Yeah.
think what bothers me about them flipping the decision and sending it back to the states to make the decision,
Hmm.
I get it on legal grounds. That this isn't in the Constitution. The states should make this decision and the states should decide it. I get the argument. I don't know that I agree with it, but I get the argument. What bothers me is that this is all cloaked and shrouded in religion.
Yes.
And we live in a country where it's freedom of religion. You can worship however you want to worship. But
I
the
feel like there should be an
idea,
asterisk there. There's an asterisk there.
yeah, and that's kind of what I'm getting at, is the
Yeah.
idea that I had a right for 50 years to make this choice if I was a woman. And now you've taken this choice away under the idea that the action that you don't want me to potentially take is runs afoul of your religious belief. But what if I don't believe in your God? I still
Right.
have to lose that right? In a
Yep.
country where no religion is more important than the other, I'm free to worship whatever I want. Islam is silent on this issue. Judaism is silent on this issue. It's only a a specific type of Christian that believes this. And that's what bothers me the most, that if I was Hindu or Buddhist or atheist and I had this right as a woman for 50 years, now you're telling me your religious belief entitles you to take my right away. That's what
Right.
bothers me more than anything about whether it's rape or incest or health of the mother or first trimester or whether it's safe, legal, and rare, whatever you want to put on it. The idea that I have to live under your religious rule is what bothers me the most about
And
that.
that
Because
actually
that's,
ends up taking that takes away the freedom of religion. That defeats the purpose of freedom of religion.
Well,
right. And now I'm going to say this. Go ahead,
go
Brian.
ahead.
Go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say the thing that always gets me is the irony that because really this is a matter of choice, right? Having body autonomy. So how do I put this? So when it comes to abortion, it's about certainly whether to terminate a pregnancy or not terminate a pregnancy, or give birth or not give birth. But it's your choice to have the autonomy to make that choice. But if it's a vaccine, a lot of not everybody, but you'll hear the chant, "Well, it's my body, my choice."
Yep,
So
but
that's
it's not my
okay.
body, my choice when it's a baby.
Exactly. Like you don't. So when it's a vaccine, you don't want the government in your life telling you what
So
medical
Brian, what you're
decisions you
saying
have to
is
make.
you can't. So what Brian, what you're saying is you can't force me to put it in my body, but if you're a woman, I can
I
force you
gotta,
as the government to push it out of your body.
yeah,
Yeah.
And there's
Yeah.
and we don't see an issue here. We don't see a false
And nobody
equivalency,
sees the irony and like it, because to me it's just it boils down to a matter of choice. And I don't want to paint with a broad brush here, but when it comes down to choice, it's either if you have the right not to get the vaccine because it's your body, your choice, then you have the right as a woman to have an abortion or not have an abortion. It's your choice because that's what it comes down to is choice. So either
hmm
in a weird sort of way, it's either all okay or none of it's okay. So decide which
and
one it
Brian,
is.
truthfully, and here's Brian. Here's the thing: if it's not all okay, I don't think that I would like it, but I would be more understanding of it if it wasn't wrapped in religion. If you didn't give it to me in religion wrapping paper, I
But
might be
remember,
able to get there.
but remember, Dennis, we had this conversation not too long ago. We know in the Bible that Jesus says that life begins at what?
No, no,
The
no, 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 no,
first
no, no. I'm gonna
breath.
stop you right there.
Or is it
No, I'm gonna
Genesis?
stop you right there. It's in
Is it
Genesis
Genesis?
that it
It's in
says
Genesis, yeah.
it's in Genesis that it says like at least that's what I believe I read. So if I'm people listening to this, if I get this wrong, then
Oh,
Yeah,
trust
email
me,
Bob and
they'll
feel
let you
free to
know.
correct me.
They'll let you know.
Yeah,
yeah.
but
Everybody
my
get your
understanding
Bibles
is that
out.
it
No King James, though. No
yeah
King James.
yeah it's my understanding based on what I thought I read that in Genesis it says life begins at birth when you take your first breath. So if this is the religious text you are grounding your entire life around, then and Jesus is silent on these issues, then
hmm
women should have the choice. Now, what bothers me about that is, and I'm not going to go off on a tangent on this, so I'm just going to say this and move on.
Do it. Do
The
it. Do it.
problem, the
Go on that
problem
tangent.
with a lot of problem with Christianity is people want to pick and choose what Bible verse they want to justify their position. And this is a really good example of that. Like Jesus is silent on abortion. Jesus is silent on same-sex marriage. Yet you found some verse from Old Testament, but you claim
Yep.
to follow Jesus. Well, if you
Yep.
follow Jesus, then these are just some stories. Everything's null and void if you follow Jesus, right?
Right.
But again, not trying to go down a rabbit hole, but I guess my biggest issue with this decision to overturn Roe is obviously the impact on women that it's going to have because if you've never been a doctor or had an ectopic pregnancy or whatever, or you had your IUD puncture your uterus, it's all these different medical sort of situations that you are just ignorant to. The idea that you're going to force some woman and put her life in jeopardy because of your religious belief and the lack of empathy you show, even though you claim to be, Christian, and Christianity is all about, at the end of the day, it's about love and sacrifice. The idea that you can't show this person compassion and empathy, and the one talking point that I cannot stand, and Jim Harbaugh did it yesterday at the
I'll raise
Big
your
Ten press
baby.
conference.
I'll
Yeah,
raise your
this
baby.
idea
Oh,
that, well,
gosh.
women should have these babies and we'll adopt them. You guys don't adopt the babies that are available now.
Nope.
There's thousands of kids in foster care, but the difference is you can wrap your mind around the idea of taking a baby, but you
Of
can't
the,
wrap your idea of taking a 12-year-old. And see,
right.
again, to
Right.
Brian's point, it's the hypocrisy is where you lose the argument with me because you're not consistent with it because
And
you need to feel good about it.
and I'll take your hypocrisy and raise you. What if that baby that you could adopt or not adopt is special needs because of the way in which they were born? You're not going to adopt that
Yeah,
kid.
the no, yeah, because most people, those kids are going to go back to the back of the line. It's human
Exactly.
nature.
exactly.
And that's not to say
Because
there aren't special
yeah,
people that would not adopt those children, because I don't want to slight them, but
because
all these
it's
people talking all this noise, that
yep,
they're not doing that.
exactly. So it's just it's one
They're
of the
not.
things where you know I just feel that I can't tell Stacy down the street what to do with herself. If she's already got like, oh, for example, like that lady that article I sent you guys a few weeks ago about the woman that broke the record for the most naturally born children.
Oh yeah, she had like
She
48
had
kids or something. She had like
44
five
children.
five sets of triplets or something
Yes,
crazy like that.
she had
That's
44
insane.
children. And the thing was because her body over ovulated. There was nothing like it was out of her hands. Her body over ovulated.
You talk about shooting somebody's club up. Good
That's what I'm saying.
God.
And the thing was is that she was, and of course, then you find out her story that she was married off at the age of 12, and that the person that she married ended up leaving her after the 40th baby was born. So now she's sitting here with 38 kids that she's got to raise on her own. Now
Yeah,
she
Man,
finally, that's what
that's
I'm saying.
hey,
insane.
I'm
But
going to get a pack of cigarettes. I'm going to get a pack of
that's
cigarettes.
quite literally, I'm going to go get 38 packs of cigarettes and I'll see you later, kind of thing.
Oh my
Now,
gosh.
she finally was able to get help in the sense where she had a hysterectomy. So there are no more babies coming out.
But again, that's a choice, to Brian's
That is a
point.
choice.
Like,
So the
But yeah,
thing is
you
no.
know what I
that
mean? Like,
what are you going to do in a
now you
situation
could
like
make the
that?
argument she should have made that choice a long time ago,
I
but
agree.
she's not. This
But
is
then
not a
again,
woman in America, so she doesn't have
it,
the resources that
no,
we
she
have.
did not have the resources. She was like from Uganda. But still, if she was here and this was happening, somebody's going to be like, man, we should probably do something so that way she doesn't keep populating. But at the same time, these are the same people that are like, well, I mean, if she's pregnant, we should probably, she has every, you can't abort it. She can't tell her, she has to have it.
Yeah,
I
see,
But it's a
what
medical
I
condition.
Well, what I will say is that I agree with George Carlin's thesis that it does happen. You don't count a baby in the census if it's in utero. Like you have to wait till it takes its first breath, right? So,
Hmm.
so this rights to the unborn thing, I get it, and I'm certainly here to have conversation, but like you got to take your first breath first. But I will also tell you that I knew a woman one time who viewed abortion as a form of birth control, and she had six of them.
I can't. I can't.
So, so
yeah, I don't support
you
that. I
know,
want to be clear.
so
I
yeah,
don't.
no, 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 no,
Irresponsible
no, no,
choices.
because I was talking with her friend about it, and I was like, I just like at that point, like you gotta, that's a life choices type deal, like we were talking about, like that's something like you might need to look in the mirror and kind of reevaluate what's going on. But then on the flip side, I knew somebody who had an ectopic pregnancy, so if if that particular woman didn't have that, they wouldn't be alive today, right?
Right.
So under the current climate, to think of that woman would not have been able potentially to have that done when her life was in danger, like that's a scary thing. And so I feel like there's, again, and I don't want to sound like I'm just straddling the fence here, but like there's got to be some sort of middle ground here. If it is endangering the life of the mother, like come on, y'all, like
The way I look at it is that
we're going to figure this out.
yeah, the way I look
Well,
at it is
but
that
that's
if
the
we're
point. I think we can
endangering the
carve
life
out
of the
some.
mother,
I think there are
well,
carve outs, and we can, and whether the
Thank you.
carve outs are life of the mother, and even if it was something where you're like, okay, one thing I've heard banted about is the when is the child, you know, viable to live outside the mother. If, like if you wanted to make that the cutoff and everybody agreed on that, fine. But like people gotta put down their pitchforks here on both sides, and like we got to figure this out.
Yeah. I
yeah,
feel like reasonable carve outs are like, to me, and this is where I really want feedback from people, because I don't want to speak in a vacuum as if I know everything, because I clearly don't on this subject. So I'm open to other perspectives and interpretations. But what feels like reasonable carve outs to me are health of the mother, rape and incest, and first trimester. Those all
Mm-hmm.
feel like reasonable carve outs to me. That
Yes.
anything past first trimester where you've got a heartbeat is a different conversation at that point. I do feel like, and you know, Denise, you keep, I don't know, but like, you know, 15 weeks or whatever it is, like, I don't know, because I don't want to pick an arbitrary number. Like, I would want it based in, like, grounded in, like, fact and science and everything.
Well, that's
But
what
those
that's what I
Right.
feel
was
like
saying. Like
reasonable
that's what I was
carve
saying. Like
outs.
it needs to be something. I don't, and like I said, I don't. I agree with you. This I don't know what that number is, but whatever that time frame is, then yeah, let's have that conversation.
I think for me it's that if the way I look at it is, and I look at it as if I'm in a particular situation, if we're in the point where we're endangering the life of the mother, or it becomes one or the other. We can either abort and save the mother, but if there's a way, but if we lose the mother and can save the baby, now we're in a different situation. So that's up to you,
Well,
or
but and that's the thing. I don't want to see. To me,
yeah,
that's a case by case scenario.
it is a
That's not
case by
Yes.
something you
case,
can. To me, you can unilaterally make a rule about, like, especially
right?
in medical situations, because everybody's medical situation is
Right.
different.
But
But
if you're telling the mother that, we no longer can, say that she's at 30 weeks and they no longer can detect the heartbeat, then I mean, or if they've
well, see,
done,
Denise,
that kind of
to
thing.
your point, I feel like if a woman had a miscarriage and she lives in a state that doesn't allow abortion, so you were going to force her to give birth to a miscarried baby, to a stillborn
Hmm.
baby, that feels like cruel and unusual punishment.
It does.
Because the trauma that your body would go through to deliver that baby, plus the mental trauma that you would live with as a result of being forced by the government to go through that act,
Hmm.
and then these same people claim to love Jesus, is where they lose me. You see what I
Well,
mean? Like,
can
like
I can
I
I can
can't
I
get
take
there with you.
can
I
I
just
can I
can't
take
get
a
there with you.
can I take a devil's advocate position?
Do it.
That's
Uh, I know. Just throwing it out there. My understanding of the ruling is that they're not saying yes or no. They're just saying that the states have to decide. Correct.
Technically, yes.
decide
So
what.
decide whether each state's going to have to make a determination as to whether what their rules and regulations are as it pertains to abortion. No.
Yeah,
Hmm.
the states are. It's left to the states to decide how they want to govern that act.
Gotcha. Okay. So if that is the case, then it is incumbent upon people who live in states where this is a question, and this is going to sound like a broken record, and this is probably a whole nother podcast, but you're going to have to get out and vote because your state legislatures are that's the seat of power, right? Um, so the Constitution also says that states that, or not, and I'm paraphrasing, but all rights and privileges that are not in this Constitution are left to the states, right? So
Hmm.
I feel like, in a weird sort of way, they punted
Hmm.
and they put it in the hands of the voters of each state.
And they
Right,
did it
because
at a
I get
time
that
where
from a
everybody
legal,
is so
but
polarized.
Yes.
that's true, Denise, and I get it, but they did it knowing what the outcome was going to be because they had stacked the legislature. But what I will say is this: I think there's an end around to this that I haven't really seen discussed too much, and there's two of them. One of them's not realistic, but one of them is because 70% of people in this country, I think I saw the other day, support abortion in some form. So I think there's two end arounds to this. One is all the women that live in a state where they banned abortion move, and you move to a state where it's um, it's an option for you. That'll kill all of this. You can't have the entire state of Missouri full of men. Like, it just doesn't work, right? But that's
Well,
not
I mean, it
realistic.
worked in it.
But
Well, I mean, that's how Rome started.
But I
well,
also think
that's
that,
again, that's
but
a
I
whole.
also think in this could be a whole nother podcast. I think there might have been some way or some carve out that they could have done this legislatively. But at one point, Democrats had 60 senators when Obama was in there. Like there have
They
Let's
been
couldn't get
not
it
do
done
that. Let's
then.
not do that. They
there
are
are
weak.
instances
They're piss. They're
I
piss
know
water. They're
again,
weak.
Dennis,
Don't put your faith in them.
again, this is something that potentially could have been done over time legislatively at a federal level, and that could be a different podcast. But on some level, if you're going to if you're laying blame, that would be a place where you could lay the blame. I feel like
Well,
somehow they were asleep at the wheel a little bit, and
they
this is
always are.
more reactionary than proactive. But like I said, that could be a different
It's what
pod
they
for a
do.
different day.
But I will say the other end around that I do think is realistic, and Denise, you keep me honest. I think it's in Michigan that I saw. They got 800,000 signatures to put an initiative on the ballot to amend the Constitution to codify abortion at a state level.
Mm-hmm.
To me, that's the end around. To say, we elected these people took the right away. Okay. Well, if Ohio got 700,000 signatures and put it on the ballot and put it up to a vote to say you can go and vote whether or not our state will allow abortion, people I think would come out and women would come out and vote for it for sure. But I think people would vote for it because you have overruled the legislature and you have added it to the Constitution as an amendment. Now, there are going to be a million legal challenges and people will try to fight it, but I do think that's a viable end around to this. To where, okay, it's not in the Constitution, fine. You kicked it back to the states. The people of the state overwhelmingly decided this is a medical procedure that we don't want taken off the table because it saves lives. It can save a life, I should say. It doesn't save
Mm-hmm.
lives, but it can save a life in certain instances that happen more often than what people think. And so let me ask you this, Denise, do you think that's a viable workaround?
I think it's a great workaround. I think that it's something that would work in a blue state. I don't see it working in a red state because while you think all the
Really?
while I think that the idea is good, not all women are going to come out for this.
Oh, that's true
There
because
are
they all women
some
didn't vote for Hillary.
yeah
All women didn't vote
there
for
are
Hillary, so
some
you're right
women
about that.
on the right. Yeah, there are some women that are on the right, and I call them covert Republican ladies because they're covert
I
in
don't
the
think they're
sense
covert.
where
I don't
no,
think
they're
they. I don't
covert.
think they're
No, they're
covert.
covert in the sense that they'll talk about women's rights, but then they go behind the curtain and be like, "But God says, babies."
Oh, like the one guy that went to his son's same sex marriage and then 3 days later voted against it.
Yes, people like that.
Okay,
People like that.
yeah, gotcha,
And
gotcha.
so therefore people in the red states, I don't do I think you would get a good turnout from the left side? Absolutely. But there's going to be those covert women, specifically white women between the ages of 45 and 75 that will go into the ballot box and vote against it.
Gotcha, gotcha. Okay. Um. So moving on, because I think we've kind of beat that up.
We've beaten the horse.
Yeah, we kind of beaten that up a little bit. The last thing I want to get to um, is, and the timing of this works out really well because I've been away for a while. The last thing I want to get to is January 6 hearings because this has really been an interesting time to be alive. And I've been telling you guys for weeks now, months now, that these guys have receipts, and they got receipts for. I would have to think if you were in the Capitol building that day as a Republican after they showed that video of Josh Hawley running through the halls, you got to be real nervous about whatever action you took that day because they can sink you now. And yes, that
Man,
was spiteful, and that has nothing to do with the people storming the Capitol, the whole nine. And I get it, but I guess Brian, I guess I'll start with you. I guess my at least initial question is, do you think these hearings have been effective, and do you think it's really changed people's perception of what happened that day and how dangerous Trump really might be?
I think it's effective in the sense that it confirms if you are in the camp that you do not like Trump or any of these Republicans in office or the whatever they call themselves or refer to themselves as, it's going to confirm your bias. I think that it has probably converted some, um, but the question I would have is, do you have enough of the converted to not have these people in office? I will fully admit it's great. It's great theater. It's great to watch.
hmm
Um, but again, if everybody is kind of in their tribal patterns, and um, I would be curious to see how many people are converted, or potentially how many people are converted the other way. Because at the end of the day, yes, we do want to find out what happened, but also you can also say that this is also politics too. And if
Oh
Republicans were
yeah,
in charge, there would be
it's
if
absolutely
and
politics.
because if Republicans were in charge, there would be no January 6th committee, right? So this is clearly a Democratic exercise. Now,
Well,
I
true, but to be fair, um, we we also had Benghazi hearings too.
oh no, I don't disagree. I
You
mean,
know what I
certainly,
mean? Like
whoever listen,
Hillary
whoever
Clinton's
holds the
testifying for 12 hours over something that where she literally clearly did nothing wrong, but yeah, we had to have hearings about it. You know what I mean?
oh no, no, I
That cuts
know.
both ways.
I get what you're saying, and certainly whoever holds the hammer of Thor is going to use it. So in this instance, Democrats have it, and certainly they have a vested interest because well, I think the American people have to use some political terms, the American people have a vested interest because you got to figure out what happened. You got to figure out what happened, so that way we can, hopefully not have those things again. But I, we had a conversation about this on a previous pod about January 6th, and I said that at that time that I don't know what this committee is waiting on, but they better hurry it up because if this tidal wave of midterms happens, they're going to be that committee is going to cease to exist come January 3rd when they swear
yep.
everybody in. So I can appreciate them having more
Do you
hearings, and
still
it's
believe that now, given what we know now and what's out in the public? That um do you really think that's still true? Because I could see people after they got the information, it's in the public, I could see people going into the booth in November and saying to themselves, you know what, I don't like any of my choices here, but I will at least vote for the person that's pro-democracy. Like it might come like this midterm election might really be about, will you protect my kid at school? Will you do you support my ability to choose to get an abortion if my life is on the line? And do you believe in democracy? It might really be those three things that people vote on. And the majority of people are probably, not probably, because I don't want to say that because I don't know, but for most regular everyday people, based on polling, they're going to say, I'm going to go with this person because they believe in those three things. And
but
those three things aren't necessarily
I
yeah, but
don't. I
but
mean, I
but you're
want to
using
believe
your
that, but no.
sensibility, but you're using your sensibilities on that. That doesn't also like those things are important, but that also is not as important as how much you're paying at the gas pump or inflation being out
It's
of
very true. That's
crazy.
again,
You
it's
know what I mean? So
accountability
if I have
project. That's why.
so if your choices are somebody who's pro democracy and stands for these things, but they are the ones in the seat when all these things are going crazy, or somebody who you think might be able to do something about it, and that person, is maybe a little fringe, whatever, but you feel like they can get this inflation shit under control. Who are you going to pick? Which one is more relevant to your life? So it's
No,
something
and
that.
that's true. I mean, that's what everybody should go in and make their choices based on how you just described it. But I also think it's one of those things where these are things that, and I'm not saying inflation's not hitting us every day because it is hitting us every single day. But everybody's got to decide what's important to you, and I think that's the point. That the
Mhm.
I I mean, Dennis, I want to be as optimistic as you. That people will walk in there and be like, you know what, this person's for democracy. I'm gonna go with this person. But after living in
I'm not being
after living in
I'm not being
uh,
positive about it. I'm just saying there are going to be people out there that'll see it through that lens. How many of them I don't know.
yeah, I don't think there's going to be very many. Hate to be that negative Nancy there, but after living in Texas as long as I did, um, and knowing how some people vote, I think it was 2012 or 2016, I can't remember which, where nobody in Texas really cared for our options at the time, and so they were writing in people, and it was everybody from Bugs Bunny to Greg Popovich to
I was
Michael
gonna say
Jordan
because
to Bugs Bunny.
you were I'm gonna say in Bexar County is where San Diego or not San Diego, excuse me, where San Antonio is, right?
Yes, it's pronounced Bear County.
Whatever.
The X is
Um,
silent.
I know,
Bear.
but I think the second highest vote getter was like oh, who was it? It was something obscure. It was like Bugs Bunny or something like that. It was like Donald
Yep,
Trump, then like Bugs Bunny, and then Hillary Clinton. It
Greg
was just like
Popovich.
yeah. So it's like so going back to the whole voting thing, it's like we're relying on people like that to
Yep,
make sound decisions on who
and
we're
those are
going to
the
have as
people
our
that are
leader.
messing it up because they don't like their choices. One and two, they're not doing the research enough on their choices to make a educated choice because that's what our problem with our country is now is that like I hate to say it, but America has ADHD. We can't pay attention long enough to make a declarative decision about anything. We can't pay attention. We flop around to so many different topics and different issues that we don't know the up from the down, which is partly goes back to even just the beginning of this whole conversation. We don't know what came before for us to make the decision now. And then when we make the decision now, the people 20 years from now aren't going to know the decision that we made. So therefore, they're going to go back and
But
it's just,
but hold on,
you know,
hold on. But that's the point of the hearings is to get it out in the public. So historically, there's a record of what happened on that day.
right.
Like
But the
that's the
problem
whole
is that,
purpose of it.
right, it is the entire purpose of it. But when you have a percentage of the country that is not paying attention, whether or not it's
Or
out in the historical record doesn't make a difference
or
anymore.
maybe they not
No, it
not
makes a
paying attention,
difference.
or maybe
Oh,
they
it
just don't
makes a
care,
difference.
or maybe they
Not
just
for
don't care.
them. Right. They just don't care.
Listen, but everything's not going to matter to everyone. But the point is that it's out there now, and you can stick your head in the sand and be an ostrich all you want. The point is that this happened, and the genius of it is that the people that they got to testify aren't from the opposite political party. These are people of the same political party who were supporting this person, who wanted them to win, but wouldn't cross a line. That's
I
what's
understand.
important here.
Yeah, that I agree. But the people that should be paying attention to this are not paying attention to this. Like Brian
Well,
said,
they've made their choice,
if
but you
you're
can't
all,
read. Yeah,
yeah,
but that's also
those are
like
the
saying
folks that
everybody
we
should watch the
need.
Super Bowl. But everybody should watch the Super Bowl by that logic. No, no, no. You have options. You don't have to watch the Super Bowl. You don't have to
Right. But
watch the hearings.
then you just know that those people are going to make the same decisions.
But
We're
Denise,
all
I
going to
go
be
back to
held
my
hostage by
original.
that
But hold on.
45.
But I go back to my
Yeah.
original question. Do you think these hearings have been effective?
Overall, yes, I would agree
Overall,
that yes.
yes.
And that's what's important because there are plenty of people that voted for him and held their nose and be like, I can't stand this guy at all, but I'm going to get my tax cut, so I'll vote for him. Now, if he decides to run again, because it's clearly on the table, um, if he decides to run again, are you going to hold your nose and vote again based on what you know now?
Not with Ron
He Trump
DeSantis over in the wings.
but hold on, but just think about this for a second. This is what's laughable. I had this thought the other day. He really thought that he could overthrow the United States government with 40,000 armed people in Washington, D.C. He could overthrow the government. He really thought that. You know what I mean? Like, that's so wild of a thought that I'm going to overthrow the United States government with 40,000 angry people who are armed. Me,
Well, hold
like,
on.
as if we
No,
don't have a
I don't.
military.
I
you,
don't think that
you know
he
what I
thought. I
mean? Like,
don't. I don't think he viewed it as overthrowing it so much as it is he just wanted to stay in power.
Yes.
well, hold on. Just hold on. But just because you didn't think about it in those terms doesn't mean that wasn't on the table.
I'm not disagreeing with you. I'm just saying
But
that I don't think that
yeah,
he viewed it as overtaking the
Okay,
government. He
hold
viewed
on.
it as
Okay, so let's follow your premise then. So you thought you could stay in power if you sent 40,000 armed people to the Capitol and took it over. How ridiculous does that sound on its face, especially in a place like Washington, D.C.? You really thought you could do that and get away with it.
I
How
the
ridiculous
only
does that sound on its face?
it sounds ridiculous. However, when you take the temperature of the country at the moment and how he was able to rile them up, and I hate to be the one to talk about history, but I'm just saying Hitler did it with less. So his logic, unfortunately, granted, we're so many years removed, and yes, we have an army, and yes, we have people who basically stayed the course and made sure that it didn't happen. But think for just a second if you didn't have those people do what they did. Just think if Pence was like,
Well,
you know
Denise,
what, it could have gone a
well, yeah, like
completely different way.
this is one of those things where one thing I cannot stand is when I hear people say, well, I can't stand Liz Cheney. I can't stand Mike Pence. They voted for him 90% of the time, blah, blah, blah. Like, yeah, I get all that. And maybe you don't share their political beliefs, but at some point, the politics doesn't matter because we're not going to have the ability to argue about politics if the government gets overthrown. The one thing I will say, I am not a fan of people quickly going in their bag, and I'm not accusing you of this, and I'm going to get to this.
No,
I'm not a big fan of people getting in their bag and quickly comparing everything to Nazis and Hitler. But what you said
I
is
mean, I could have.
important,
Yeah,
and
I
this is the one
mean,
time. But hold on, but this is the one time I'm going to let it go because a lot of people don't study history the way that you do, the way that we all collectively kind of know it, that people either don't know or have forgotten that part of the way in which Hitler rose to power is he surrounded the parliament building and threatened to burn it down with parliament inside if they didn't vote to make him chancellor. This is
yep,
not far off that.
no, no. I mean, and
I'm
I
not saying,
mean,
to be
even
clear, I'm not saying Trump is Hitler because he's not. I want to be clear about that.
no,
I'm not saying that because he's not. But the action of that day is not far off of the action from 90 years ago or whatever it
no,
was. And that's the only
no.
point that I'm making. And I think that's the point that
I
you're
would
making.
say yes, that yeah, and I mean, and yes, I use Hitler because it's the one everybody goes to. But I mean, you also could have made the same. I could have used um, Mussolini and or Pol Pot. I mean, I could have used the same thing. And the point still would have been across. I just use Hitler because it's universal and everybody knows who Hitler is. Not everybody knows who Pol Pot is. So you know, because then that takes
So
us
let
down
me
a whole
ask you
nother
this. So
road.
the news broke late last night. This is Wednesday night. So it broke late Tuesday night that the Justice Department is now got grand jury investigations going, and they are actually um, investigating Trump for the actions that he took. So I guess my question to you guys is, do you really think he'll be charged with something? And if he is, I've heard some talk that this will lead to civil war, which is hyperbole to me. But um, what do you think the fallout is? Do you think he'll be charged? And if so, what do you think the
Brian, you want to go with that one?
Uh, I don't think people will be happy about it. Some people, I should say, won't be happy about it, but um, I think that I the fallout is it's unprecedented. But I would argue that it kind of calls for it. Like when who was it? The attorney general that he was interviewed on um, NBC the other day, and he said, we operate on, and I'm paraphrasing, but we operate under the premise that no one person is above the law. And so if anybody was involved with that, then yes, they're going to be prosecuted. Well, if that is the case, um, then I don't see, based on what the TV show has shown us, the season finale and everything, um, I don't see how you can't, um, at least at minimum, have a grand jury to vet it. I mean, Georgia's doing it, so I don't see how you can't, based on the evidence that we have in front of us and everything that we've seen.
and and then
And
if
like
they do,
and to your credit, or not to your credit, but as you said, yeah, there might be some people out here in the out here in these streets protesting, and certainly that side of the aisle, so to speak, they probably got a lot more guns than the people on the left. So, so I know you mentioned at one point talking about being being outgunned, but but yeah, I mean, there might be some people taking it to the streets for sure. And I think that logic will be lost on some people in the sense that you can lay all the evidence bare that this man did X, Y, and Z. And as a result, that's why we are doing this. We're not doing it. This is a political operation here, but people don't want to hear that. And so as a result, yeah, there's some people that might, uh, like that song says, taking it to the streets. Michael
so,
McDonald, taking it to the streets.
Ah, you know what? You've reached pinnacle when we can reference Michael McDonald.
now well played. So if he is charged, um, you know, it I struggle with the fallout, not because I'm scared of what comes. It's more of the I struggle with people who try to defend the indefensible. Like you're so far in your feelings that yet you can't get past what's obvious here. That crimes were committed or allegedly committed, and we need to go to court and we need to settle it like everything else. The idea that he was the president, or let's put that aside, the fact that you like the guy, so therefore we should just give him a pass is where you lose me. Does that make sense? Because
Hmm.
there's a lot of people that I've liked that, you know what? Or there's a lot of people that like me, but if I committed a crime, people are going to shrug their shoulders and say, no, you shouldn't have done the shit.
That's
And they
not
got
going to
every
be
right to
me.
say that.
That's not
Well,
going to
no,
be me.
because
You got to go down.
you're a rule follower. You're a rule follower. Um, but I guess Denise, that's kind of where I'm at. Is I don't worry about the fallout so much as it is why are you trying to defend somebody that that you can't really defend their action? You know what I mean? Like
Yeah. I mean,
like
I
you know what I
think
mean?
that the amount of receipts that have been thrown out is longer than my usual CVS receipt, and that sucker's long. Um, but I think that I'm with Brian. No one is above the law. Do I think he'll get charged? Yes. Do I think there'll be a grand jury? Probably. But that's about as
No, there
far
is
as
a
I'm
grand
willing
jury.
to go.
No, Denise, there is a grand jury. There's
I
a
well,
federal grand
yes.
jury now.
Yeah, okay. So yeah, fine. That. After that is anybody's guess. Because we're in I hate to, we haven't been in a situation like this ever, and the closest we ever came to something like this was Watergate. And Watergate, looking back on it, is child's play.
Yeah.
I don't even think Nixon would have gone this route.
Well, you try to
And
overthrow the government. It's a whole other conversation. So
yeah, so I mean, you know, I think because we're in an area that is up in the air. Now, as far as like people say that this is going to lead to civil war, pump your brakes there for a second. Considering why we went to war the last time, there are a lot of things. I mean, yes, there was only one main thing, but besides that point, I don't.
States' rights rears its ugly head again. I'm sorry.
Yes, yes, that's right. In the
I'm
South,
kidding.
it's
I'm
states'
joking.
rights.
I'm kidding.
Yes,
Kidding to the listener. I'm
yes.
kidding.
If you're
It's
if
not
you're
the
from
cause of
those if
civil
you're from
war.
those specific 11 states, it's states' rights, quote unquote states' rights. But um, but it's just like that day that if you asked me to name like the top 5 worst presidents ever, and it was just like, well, we know that
now we don't
Trump's
need to
in
go
it.
past one. We don't need to go past one. Like
Yeah, it's just like
it's pretty
he's
clear.
he's yeah, he's pinnacle here. At this point, I give the other 4 dudes passes because they would never have done anything like this.
So let me ask this question, and we can end on this. We can end on this. How much does it bother you that people who know better, who who you might personally know, and maybe you don't personally know them, but just in general, how much does it bother you for people that know better are still out here actively defending him and saying the election was stolen? Like, how much does that bother you? Because I'm going to be honest, it really bothers me, and it says so much about your character as a person that you still cling on to something that is objectively false. You know what I mean? Like, that really says a lot about you as a person and your character. How much does that bother you at all?
It does, and it reminds it. Let's be honest, it infuriates me to be around this level of ignorance, and
It hurts your
no,
head. Like, it
it
really
hurts your
hurts your
head.
head. Like, what are
Um,
we talking about here?
but when I hear people do, it has me questioning their own morals and what they actually believe when they're not around me. Because again, as somebody that is a woman and a minority, a person of color, by you defending him, it makes me think, what are you really believing at home?
For
And
me, that's obvious, but I
yeah, I know, but and that reminds me of a quote, and it's actually on my Facebook. Let me find that real quick. My Facebook that I never log into anymore. Um,
You
from
mean
France
meta?
Fanon, and let me see, where is it? It says, "We can disagree and still love each other unless your disagreement is rooted in my oppression, in denial of my humanity and right to exist."
bingo, bingo, and that's
That
non-negotiable.
that's non-negotiable. And even though we're talking just January 6th, but that goes around that goes around the block for everything we've talked about this evening. And if you're willing to defend January 6th and Trump, and tell me that that I'm going to hell because I decided to abort a baby, or that I really don't, or I say things about you having an AR-15, like all of that, then we can't talk. We're never going to be able to find a bridge if your logic is rooted in this level of ignorance.
1,000%.
Well,
Ladies and gentlemen, I am done for the night.
But Denise, but you're not going to be able to build that bridge unless you have the conversation. And so part of being a grown up is to have conversations with people that you don't agree with, right? So, there
Technically,
has to be so technically there has to be some sort of dialogue. What I would say is, you know, I think you can. I don't want to make it simplistic, but for those who are hardcore 1,000% backing Trump, and um, January 6th was just the dust up, as famously said here recently. Um, I guess what I would ask is that if Democrats did the same thing, would you just refer to it as a dust up? Which I'm assuming you probably wouldn't. You'd want them to be prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law, because you would say that would be wrong. So if that is the case, then how do you support this? Right.
right.
I think that I don't want to blame media on it, but it has been described that these people are patriots. I would argue that that is false. Because patriots just
You
don't.
can't be a patriot and you can't you can't be a patriot and beat up and kill cops. Those two things
No,
don't go.
you also can't.
No, not at all.
You also can't claim that you support the blue if you beat them up. Just some
And you
saying.
can't threaten to hang the vice president.
Yeah, let's just start there.
You know
Let's
what?
just the idea that you were going to hang the vice president. Let's just
You
no
know.
patriots don't hang the vice president. Let's
Side
just
note. Side note that typically doesn't happen in democracies. Um, but yeah, if you could defend that, like I you guys know, and certainly I'll have conversations about anything, about anytime, anywhere, about anything. So I'll have
Yeah,
a
God bless
conversation.
you for it.
But I don't see it. This might be subjective, but right is right and wrong is wrong. Right? We are all brought up with some semblance of what right and wrong is. Now, certainly, there are people whose right and wrong is a bit skewed. But
But
I
hold on,
just
Brian. But it's right and wrong regardless of of your feelings. Like
it
it's
should be.
objectively right. It's
It should
objectively wrong regardless of how you feel about it.
it should be. It's not, but it should be. Um, but like I had a conversation with a guy one time not too long ago, and he was complaining about how, and maybe this puts a bow on everything, about how um, all the gun laws are going to be changed because of that shooting in Buffalo. With the majority people of color that were killed. Um, and I said, well, you know, killing people of color is not anything new, so nobody's going to change the law over that. I said, if the laws are going to be changed, if they were going to be changed, they would have changed to address the killing of children. And once it was okay for children to be killed in schools, well, I don't see anything coming down the pipe, because then people will fall back on the Second Amendment. So I
Well, I will.
just
Yeah, go ahead, Brian.
no. Go ahead.
No, I was going to say, Denise and I had this conversation the other day. Historically speaking, change happens in this country when one group of people decide that they've had enough and they are going to demand change, and this group typically gets it. And you can look all the way through. You can go back the last 200 years in this country. When this group of people speaks up and says, we want change, change happens. So I'm basing this on historical trends and nothing more. But I tend to put my faith in seeing that these things get changed for the better. I tend to put my faith in middle class white people, because that is the group of people that consistently, when they speak up and say this is wrong and it needs to change, it changes. Because we are only 12% of the population. There aren't enough of us to make a difference. We if you got everybody who look like us to vote, it's not enough. But and again, I I feel uncomfortable saying that out loud. But Denise, much like you, being a student of history tells me that's where the change is.
Right.
And I just put my faith. But at the same time, if you allow me to put that on the shelf, I just think that these hearings being on TV and these people having the courage to go in front of the entire world and say, this is what happened. This is what I know to be true because I was in the room when it happened. I think it fundamentally changes everything, but none of it's going to matter because these hearings, they can't put people in jail. You just have to hope that if we're really a nation of laws and we're going to hold people accountable, that the Justice Department is going to do what it should do and charge people with crimes, send them to trial, and then let the chips fall where they may. But I think it's a mistake not to charge him. I think it's a way worse mistake not to charge him. Even I would rather see you charge him and he gets off on a technicality and we can deal with that versus he isn't charged at all because we're scared to charge him of what message it might send or a precedent it would set.
Well, two things. One, I had heard that if he was going to roll anything out, this is the Justice Department in Merrick Garland. If they're going to roll anything out, it would be after the elections because they don't want it to seem like it's a political thing. But I also think that he is hoping that this thing in Georgia comes to fruition and he doesn't have to do anything. Georgia will take care of him, and that way he doesn't have to charge a former president.
Yeah, one can hope.
Or he can
I don't
use
know.
what's
One
happening
can.
in Georgia as the precedent and just be
Yeah,
like, Georgia's already done it at the state level.
Yeah, let's say that's Georgia doing it on their own thing at the state level. So if he gets tied up doing that, then he might not have to do anything because Georgia will take care of it.
Well, very true, but I could also see him using it as a jumping off point to get federal charges made.
So I don't know. So we'll see. Time will tell.
Yeah, I guess time will tell. Well, again, I hadn't done this in a while, and I wanted to talk to you guys because apparently, as Americans, this is who we really are. We're okay with mass shootings and gun violence. We're okay with taking women's right to choose away, especially in certain medical situations or certain life situations. And apparently, we're okay with a president that tried to some of us are okay with the idea of a president trying to hold on to power and kill his vice president. And all this is going on, and it's a lot. And, I start to question, is this who we really are? I hate to be like you, Brian, and say that the answer clearly is yes, this is who we are. I want to be glass half full about this, but, it's hard to be, positive about any of it. But, I do think, though, that the more mass shootings happen, the more once it comes to your town, people are gonna, like what was it, 4th of July, where at Hyde Park, this guy's on the top of the building just lighting people up.
Yep.
Like, you know what I mean? Like it's just one after another, and like, I don't want to become numb to this, but at the same time, like, thoughts and prayers aren't going to get it done either.
Nope.
So,
what's the definition of insanity again?
Yeah, right. Exactly. Exactly.
Well, and again, like just to kind of put a button on it, you have to want to do something about it. If you don't want to do anything about it,
collectively, yeah.
Collectively, you have to want to do something about it. So if nobody wants to do anything about it, then it's kind of,
Yeah. And speaking of collectively doing something about it, let's end on a positive note. Doing something collectively about it. What are you guys going to do about your quarterback situation with the Steelers?
I knew it was.
Oh, come on! I mean,
a real wind up. I'll be brief. I will say that I think that they should start Trubisky and they should sit on Pickett for the year. Because if you put Pickett out,
okay.
Because I think if you put Pickett out there and he's terrible, and then you have to pull him for Trubisky, then you're just kind of shooting his confidence. So why not just bring him along slowly, and then just if the things go in the shitter during the season, then you could always say, okay, well this season's over, we'll just go with the young guy. But they're only paying him. They're only paying. Well, obviously they got not Trubisky, Pickett on a rookie deal. and they're only paying, Pickett's on the rookie deal, and they're only paying Trubisky like $7 million. So, like, the money is just, it is what, like, you know, the money's not it's not an issue here. And I think this means at the end of the Mason Rudolph era. So I know Denise, I'll leave some room for Denise to,
That
kind
can't
of
go.
more in that era,
That
the
guy.
loss of that era.
I'm not. There's no mourning. I am on the Anybody But Mason Rudolph campaign. I
Mm-hmm.
am the chairman and CEO. I'm glad he's gone.
You were the chairman and CEO.
Yes, I'm all about that
That's
campaign.
good.
I'm glad that that's coming to an end. Um, at this point, I would have to agree with Brian, though. I would rather have Trubisky in first. Let Pickett get in. Let him have the year. Let him get acquainted. And I actually read just the other day, now that camp has started, that Trubisky is actually training with Pickett and giving him pointers and all that stuff. So he basically was like, yeah, I understand it's a competition between me and him, but that's not going to stop me from helping him out and him helping me out. Like, we're still a team. So it is what it is. So with that kind of mentality
That's what
going into,
that's
I'm fine
real
with that.
bridge quarterback energy. And then this is the last question I have. I really do. This is the last question. Because I know your disdain for this team, but you guys have to be pro white helmets for the Bengals. You guys have to be pro that,
Those things are hard, man.
because those things are
You
hard.
can,
I don't care what nobody. I cannot wait to
that might be
see
the best
those
alternate helmet.
guys.
I got to give credit where
Yeah.
credit's due. That might be the best one out there. The Cardinals one's pretty tough too. I think we can all agree that the Bears one is the worst. Sorry, River.
God, the Bears one is
God, those
trash.
are
It is
terrible.
so trash. At least put a stripe down
Ugh.
the middle to break it up. That shit was so, like, the orange jerseys are bad enough, but with an orange helmet, like, come on,
It,
Chicago, you failed the assignment. Come on, bro.
have
What are
you?
we
I know that,
doing?
and I don't know if you guys follow NFL memes or not, but they also released a version of the new Browns helmet, and
What?
it's also white. Yeah, it's also
Oh
white,
no,
and it has the Browns helmet on the white helmet.
that's awful.
Yeah, no one
So
asked for that.
no one
Yeah,
asked for
no
that,
one asked for
but
that.
At
it
least
was a
with the
wonderful
Bengals,
symbol.
it's a white Bengal tiger. Like, that makes sense. But
Yeah.
Yeah, it's
no,
rare, right? It's rare.
I don't even know how you do that with the Browns. Like, it's just
Oh,
no.
Yeah, but that
I just
I
sent it to both of you, so you can both see it. It
I'm
was a
gonna
good
tell you.
chuckle.
I'm gonna tell you the truth. I'm gonna tell you the truth. Well, the first time I saw that white Bengal helmet, like, I'm not a Bengals fan, but I had a half a mind to buy the helmet. I thought it was that dope. I really thought it was that dope. I know that's something you guys would never do, but
No, no.
oh,
No,
that Cleveland
I
Browns
don't
helmet is
think the Steelers
trash.
are. No, the biggest update that they did to their I'm gonna say their resumes. The biggest update they did to their uniforms is when they changed the numbers, like 20
Oh
years
yeah,
ago.
Yeah,
oh gosh, no.
Other than that, like, no, they changed them to what they currently are right now. That was great, Denise.
gotcha.
That was, man,
Uh,
that like depths below. That was good.
Yeah, sorry
Overall,
about
I'd give it
that.
an 8 though.
Yeah. So on that note, I thank you guys for jumping on here. There's a lot of stuff I wanted to cover. I hadn't done it in a while. So again, thank you for being a part of my accountability project to kind of pulse check my thoughts to make sure that I'm not way off base on stuff. And as always, send your feedback for the pod at talltattedandeducated@gmail.com. Would love to hear what you guys thought about this particular episode, and correct me on anything I may have misstated, because I'm sure I misstated some things. But with that, Brian, Denise, thank you guys for jumping on. We'll do this again real soon.
Okay, dokie.
all right.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Peace. Yep.
Bye.
See you. Peace.